Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of the Unheated Podcast, run by Thea Ventures. We are an early stage climate tech fund based in India, and we are delighted to have here today Hampus Jacobson from Pale Blue Dot with us for this podcast. So, welcome, Hampus. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So Hampus, just to give a background on his experience so far, he is a general partner at Pale Blue Dot, which is an early stage venture fund in Sweden, which backs European climate tech companies. Pale Blue Dot are investing out of their second fund with a total of $200 million in assets under management and an established portfolio of 32 companies, including notable investments such as Monta, Patch, Overstory, ClimateX, and Opna. And prior to co-founding Pay Blue Dot, Hampus was a venture partner at science fund Blue Yard and a prolific angel investor with more than 100 angel investments. He is a software engineer turned founder, turned angel investor, turned VC. So really excited to have you here today, Hampus. And I think we would love to hear, just to start us off with this conversation, how you decided to start Pale Blue Dot with Heidi and Joel, your other co-GPs. What was the motivation to start the fund? How did you come up with the name, the thesis, and the mandate? And why a fund and not another sort of deep tech company?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that we came out of that. Heidi Newell and I all built companies, and I think that we were very shaped by that experience. I think that as many entrepreneurs are, it's like I think we all humans are that, when you found a hammer, the world looks like a nail. So you can see that how entrepreneurship and startups could solve any problem on the planet. But I think that we were all very, very sound skeptics to that thesis. Because Heidi comes from humanitarian aid originally, sees that a lot of havoc that actually corporates are doing, and a lot of organizations that are set up to do something good that are not doing something good. Yul and I started a initiative for cities to use data science to kind of help them plan anything from elderly care to, child caring services, like everything around a city which just doesn't have data. And we actually saw a lot of things that were not that great ideas to touch by startups, and usually because there's a misalignment between the kind of financial success metric and the kind of actual success metric of what you're supposed to do. So we kind of, with a very sound skepticism, we were in different places, like job-wise and actually geographically as well. And we were constantly discussing this and just talking about that more funds should to try to figure out a way to invest in less irritating stuff and operate more friendly to entrepreneurs. And so, like as you mentioned, I was at Blue Yard at the time, and I found it crazy that Blue Yard were able to kind of reign Europe in the way they did. I think that it was very rare at the time that you had a fund that could say, there are two people out of a shed, they really don't have anything. We think it's going to be amazing. We think that this is the best way of predicting the future is actually investing in it and helping them get off the ground. And I think that a lot of funds in Europe, historically, if you go back like 10 years, a lot of funds were very much like banks that looked at like a MRR curve and figured out if this was the right way to underwrite the financial opportunity. And I think that, so I very much like that experience of saying, hey, you can actually shape the future by investing in it. So you could build a company, of course, but you could actually also accelerate one that is existing one or another. And Heidi and Newell were building an accelerator and figuring out a way to help people set up and start companies and accelerate them. And in that experience, we were just discussing why many funds were not like behaving as they should. Maybe, I don't know if like the best way of saying it. We were just trying to figure out like, how should one do? Like, how should one build like the optimal portfolio? How should one help entrepreneurs the best? How should one talk to this? And we just try to talk to a lot of funds and try to figure out why they're not doing this. And it was more like, I think that when you see something that looks broken, I think all three of us are the kind of people that just go around and ask us like, oh, why is this looking like this? Is there a screw here? Is there a reason for that? And we just were met with, this is how it's always done, kind of like shut up kind of conversations. And I think that as an entrepreneur, when you see something that is broken, you either have to realize that you have to just accept it, you have to ignore it and get away from the problem to stop seeing it all the time because it's just going to piss you off, or you have to start fixing it. And I think that we all realize that we can't accept the status quo of the industry being run by a certain kind of like very wealthy, privileged male individual only investing in other men, doing like chewing gum machines. kind of things, or social media. And we also felt that because we were in the ecosystem in different shapes or forms and had been for many years, we just couldn't ignore it. So I think that, to be honest with you, I think that we started it because we just couldn't figure out another way to get that bug out of our head. So we started then saying, okay, maybe we then do some kind of fund. And then we started figuring out, and this is 2019. And I think the weird thing about that is that now, looking back, it sounds like, oh, of course, like a climate fund makes sense. The weird situation we had where when we started the fund, we had a discussion, could we actually be a pure play climate fund? And like, it was very, very hard to get people to even think that was possible. 2019, there were a lot of people who just told us, and we started the fundraising 1st of October 2019, so we didn't have like plenty of horrible months there in 2019, but it was just like this strange situation where most people said, oh, that's very nice of you, but there's no companies to be found, there's no profit to be found, like, look at the clean tech bubble, look at like venture philanthropy, everybody's like through these reasons not to do it. And honestly, I'm fairly surprised to think back that the fact that we just were boneheaded enough to persevere and think, no, we're going to do it, which I think is typically kind of classical entrepreneur trait, that we just felt we were going to prove them wrong, kind of almost. So we raised that fund, and I think the funny thing was that during the fall, essentially most of the conversations were either, is climate change real, or is it even borderline investable? And then when sort of Q1, Q2 came around in like 2020, people agreed, like, in a lot of places of the world, people said, yeah, climate change is real, but probably very hard to make money on. And then in conversation by conversation, we just met people who said, I think you might be onto some opportunity here. Let's talk. And then we kind of end up closing the fund in June. And it was very strange because it was like a very strange catch-up effect where I think we were just on this like macro trend of exponential growth, of like how people started caring about it and realizing that this might be one of the biggest financial problems we have on the planet, but it also is one of the most biggest financial like relocation of capital. It's like people, I think people used to look at climate change as in like it's not fixable almost, and then it's like it's fixable but not by us, by like science or like by corporates or by politicians, and then suddenly it dawned on people like, hey, we could maybe fix it. But then I think we had a quick era of, okay, I'll just have to go vegan, I'll stop driving and stop like using my airplane and everything. And then some people were like, or what? Wait, can't we do anything else about it? And I think that switch was very fast. And I think we just happened to be on the curve when that dawned on people. So the fundraising was such a strange experience when it went from, what are you doing, to, oh, you're genius. And we're like, what? We're not genius. We're like, wait, what are you talking about? So I think that we just happened to be in a lot of conversations where people said, this is the biggest project humanity has ever undertaken. Like, if you think about how we wired the world with internet, that has taken 40 years, or 50 years, right? Like, there's so much things that have been invented. We're deploying it slowly, country by country, region by region. If you look at mobile phones, sure, it was fast, but it was still like, the thing here with climate change is like, you think about it, it's like, oh my God, this has to be deployed so quickly and proliferated everywhere. And not only can we say, sure, you can use your 4G phone in Tokyo, you can have to get rid of every single shitty landline phone on the planet because that quote unquote pollutes. Like, you have to get rid of every bad actor as well. And I think that I think is like the way we caught, so to say.
No, that's a fantastic, story and so inspirational how you built it. Also, just going into COVID, into the pandemic. So as you were telling me about the quarters, I realized that Q1, Q2, Q3. I mean, closing a fund during COVID is not an easy task. So kudos to you and the team.
So one of the ways we did fundraising is actually we told people, like, if you did an intro to us, just like, hey, Hampus, this is like Alicia. She's super interested in investing in Pale Dot. I've talked plenty to her. She's great. I would just respond, hey, Priya, thanks very much. Like, moved you BCC. I was like, hey, Alicia, just want to tell you so you know, Pale Dot is like, we're emerging managers. This is our first fund together. It's a sub $100 million fund, probably around 90 million euros. We're Euro domiciled. Like, we're actually in Sweden, which most people don't like that we are, like, legally, because people think we're in a communist country. We do only climate, which a lot of people don't have a clue if they're going to make money on. And like, we just like threw everything, all these parameters in the email. And then I ended the email saying, but if you want, Alicia, like, more than happy to, like, jump on a call with you or share with your deck, share our deck. Like 60-70% responded to that email saying, thank you very much, Hampus. Sadly, we can't invest in emerging managers. Or sadly, I just gave them a very easy out. Like, they were like, reason number 5, thank you very much, not on my calendar anymore. Which meant that the people who said, I'd love to know more. They were like, I know these things. I'm still interested. And then I shared the deck with them, and I said, like, happy to jump on a call. And then I would say it was a 50-50, like 50% were just like, they were just storing the deck. They didn't care shit about it. They were just like, they needed it for the, for the CRM. Thanks, bye. And then like the 50% who came to the meeting, they were like, I have a lot of questions. And of those, I would say it was like 20-30% who ended up investing. And the good thing here is these were video calls, right? Like, and I think that when we raised fund 2, we raised it the exact same way. We actually, for fund 1, we actually went to Luxembourg once. We went to Stockholm twice. Did we go anywhere else? Like a couple of small things. I think maybe Copenhagen or whatever. Yeah, we went to Helsinki once. But like, very, very few trips. Pale 2, we didn't travel. Like, I never left this room, more or less. And the reason was that we told everybody, if you don't want to invest, you shouldn't invest. But more than happy to talk to you. Which meant that every person who came to the call were like, no, I know. Like, I am interested. And I think that's the thing, which I think that makes it possible, is that we were able to cast the net so much wider. So a lot of people say, oh, you have to talk to like hundreds of LPs. Like if you get them to not actually meet you, if you actually don't have to travel, if you actually don't even go on a Zoom call, like you can quote unquote have interactions with like 500 LPs, because they don't cost anything, like time wise, right? And you don't waste their time. And then this 80 that you meet on video, they're like, yeah, I'm actually really keen, right? And I think that in Pillbot 1, we have 71 LPs in Pillbot 1, where, of course, just like normal world, it's like 10 that constitutes like 90% of the fund. And we had plenty of people that were just joined the first like call and said, I love this. My biggest ticket I can do is 100K euros. And we were like, yeah, like, that's great. And I think that we saw it more like a seed fund fundraising, that you pile on a couple of angels. And I think we learned from Pillbot 2 to Pillbot 2 that that's complicated. It's complicated to have people who put in 100K, because for them it's messy. It's too small amounts per drawdown. It's like they actually haven't maybe financially planned their year. So for them, it's like when you draw money for them year 3, they're like, "Are you still around?" It's like, "Yeah, we're going to be around for another 7."
Yeah.
So I think that we kind of learned, and Pillbot 2, we have 50 LPs, where I think that 20 of them constitutes like 80% of the capital. And I think that we're going to like try to get that fewer and fewer for every fund, just to make it easier for LPs.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And curious to understand, you mentioned this huge financial opportunity for climate tech, and how to convince, different investors when the climate change problem, once you've got over the hurdle of explaining, yes, climate change is a problem, now you have to convince them that it's a business opportunity, you can make money on it. So how did you sort of go about building that first few companies in your portfolio? Where did you source them from? Where did you see? And I know that you have a bunch of deep tech companies. You also have some asset light companies. So how did you think about the construction there, and what key themes were you looking at?
So, like, to answer your question of deal flow, I would say, like, we measure it. I can tell you data, but if I want to know the truth, it feels like it's magic. Like, I'm really, really happy for it. Like, we love meeting these amazing founders, but it feels like it's hard to just scale and say we want to meet 100 times as many amazing founders. But then item number 2, our portfolio composition. I think that's a very interesting way of thinking about it. It's like, so the way we act is that the 3 of act, because of our different personalities, we kind of invest very much in what we love. And the way that our whole, like, quote unquote voting structure works, and the reason I put air quotes on it, is that Heidi, Joel, and I can invest in any deal we want. Like, Heidi can just go on and say, I want to do this deal. Yours and my job then is to tell Heidi, I don't like this about it, I don't like this about it, and so on and so forth. And she can just ignore us and go on and invest in this company, which means that we can have a super swift process. But the good thing is we're trying to remove each other's biases. So we're trying to just say, like, is this one of those companies again that usually will struggle with this? And then the person leading us said, like, I know what you mean, but I think this is different this time, and about this and this reason. And so the portfolio there, and then the only thing we can do is, like, we can give a fund veto no, which has never happened. But that is like, you meet, like, somebody just says, like, you realize this is a neo-Nazi, like, this is a neo-Nazi, and like, we can't do it because it's a fund portfolio risk. Or this is a company that is in a geography where it could actually sink the whole fund. Like, it's like, this could just raise the whole, tax pollute the whole fund. So we can't do it. So, but in every single, the way we're trying to build a portfolio, like, and I mean, like, portfolio as in, like, financial model, is every single quote unquote bet, every single investment can be absurd risk, as long as they're individually contained in, like, a little virtual machine. So they're all, like, running on their own. And if this thing fails, it fails itself, and then it like debundles and it's gone. But like it can't like take down the whole thing. And I think that way means that we can actually think about it anyway. But of course, as you're saying, like, would we do like 35 hardware investments that are first of a kind financing? Probably not. Because what happens is like when we start loading these in like we just go like, shit, that's so complicated. Maybe we should stay away from that a bit. We need to learn more. So we have plenty of times we've done something in a field and we take a step back and we say, this is a very interesting field. Let's think more about what's going to happen here until we do more investments. And then we work with that company and then we figure out, okay, there is more. So like, for example, I think we've done 7 or 8 in mobility. And I think we've done 5 or 6 companies that are so close that they like collaborate on a weekly basis almost. Which is kind of crazy because there is a risk that these might turn into competitors in a way. But like we've done so many companies in the EV charging stack in different ways. And it's because we've done one and then we suddenly, in the board of that company, they said, this is unsolvable, this other problem, but it doesn't matter. Like we're just going to outsource it. And then we meet that other company. It's like, but you're doing it. And then we introduce them to each other. And then the founder of the first company says, yeah, this is smart. I can't do it. I don't know how they're doing it, but it actually seems to work. And then we engage with them. So like sometimes like we build these like ecosystems. So like in mobility, we have a lot. And I think that we have a lot of like in different kind of food systems, but these are actually very disconnected. And that's because our thesis in food is very, very different from mobility. So like we're trying to like build these things. And what we're frustrated about is that it's very, very hard to fix certain problems. So like for venture to say, like there are certain problems, like I think that actually the food system, like what we eat is one of the hardest problems to solve because it aligns, like it has 3 problems. Like you have like all problems, I think, have 3 solutions. You have policy, like a different kind of incentives, you have behavior, and then you have technology and innovation. And the headache is that I think that in food, all these 3 play in. Like we subsidize meat quite a lot. Like we have like technology, like we have a lot of like clean meat coming, but it's very, very expensive in comparison to like chickpeas, of course. And then behavior, people are like, don't touch my habits and whatever I'm doing. So the problem with food is that these things actually nastily interact with each other in a bad way. Whereas like if you take electromobility, all these 3 is actually like very nice. So mayors are saying, I would prefer not to have big vehicles in the center of my city just because of pollution and like, asphalt coming up. I don't care about CO2 necessarily, maybe. So like, please forbid diesel trucks in the city. And then you have like behavior. People are like, oh, it's much cheaper to run an EV. This is like, way better. And then technology is like EV cars and batteries are just like soon getting better and better. So suddenly these 3 interact very, very nicely with each other. So certain areas we look at, we just ask ourselves, is this going to get like I don't want to use like necessarily like a flywheel, but will we get like a positive interaction between this, or will we get like a negative interaction with these? In certain fields, we're just like, we have done 1 or 2 or 3 investments, and those founders are amazing. But then we're just thinking, how on earth will this problem ever be fixed? And then we're just like waiting to see how the world develops.
Very, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So you mentioned, the different areas of EV, possibly batteries and other parts of the value chain there, and then food and ag and food tech. Do you see a large opportunity in areas like circularity, kind of circular economy, waste
Yeah.
management, and also in areas like carbon storage or carbon capture, direct air capture? Where do you think some of the emerging trends are coming from? And are they just trends or are they real solutions?
Yeah, I think that the way I think about it is, I always like, I think I want 2 things to align for a business at all. And then I think that we want a third just because we're a early stage venture fund. But I think that what I think you need is like, you need to be on a macro trend that like makes sense. Like if you look at a company and ask yourself, will this thing be around like 2050? And if it feels like, no, in 2050 or whatever year you want to say, people just won't do this. Like this is going to be, no, people won't. And you can look at that, like there's so many of these short-term optimizations, like will people like lease versus rent versus buy or whatever. Those things are like, it's very hard to predict because like it's underlying financial economy, it's like, inflation rates and everything else. But then there are certain things that it's just like, people will still do this. Like this thing people will do. So like, will people continue to buy stuff, quote unquote, online? I don't like whatever you want to call online in the future. I feel like, yeah, they will. And that macro trend will probably increase because of city density. So like the denser the cities become, the more you want goods that are like maybe not stored like in your basement or like, the shop downstairs. So like it's going to be, you have to figure out that supply chain, transportation, like all of that. Okay, so that feels like it's not going to go away, and it might even increase. And then number 2, I think it just needs to make like business sense. Like when you look at a business, like I think a lot of times when you hear an idea, it just feels like, I know we ought to do this, but like just like tell me if I'm a completely climate denying CEO, like as a customer or a partner or a vendor or supplier or whatever, like why would I do this? It's just like, do I do it because of like the green badge I get? Do I get it because the subsidy in 2024? Or do I get it because like, hey, it decreases my risk, like increases my margins, like, and like if you can't make the business sense out of it, it's really tricky. Like it's really, really hard, I think, to come up with a good business idea. And number three, then, I think, which is just because we're an early stage venture fund, and the earlier you go and the more venture you are, the more of this. I think for us, it needs to be different. So what I mean by that is like one of the tricky things is like when we meet a company and like I think the best companies we meet are the ones that it's obvious to us. It's obvious, of course, it's obvious to the founder because they're like they're drinking their own Kool-Aid and they're like full of this idea, but it's not obvious for the rest of the planet. Those are the ideas that are the absolutely best ones. And what I mean by that is like if it's obvious for you and it's obvious for us, but it's also obvious for everyone else, it's really tricky. It's really tricky to find venture there. And I think the way to think about it, I think the best analogy is like a Charlie Munger analogy, which is like early stage venture investing is very much like horse betting or whatever analogy you want to have with bets. And that is like, or nowadays, like, you know, just online betting, I guess. But the thing here is that it doesn't matter if you think this horse will win or not. Like if you like rank all the horses running, you have like 10, 20, 30 horses running, you're like, this is the horse that I think is best. The problem is like if everyone else thinks that horse is best, like you're like winning ratio, like sure you're going to win, but your multiple is going to be fairly low, but because the price is going to be so high. And then I think that the second problem is that there's like just a transaction fee, like the bookie takes 17% or whatever, and then on top of that you have the alternative problem, like you didn't choose the other horse because like you've just selected your horse. So one of the big headaches we have is that we kind of have to find contrarian, different, kind of crazy, whatever you want to call it. You have to find something where we just feel like we like this, and I can see that most people don't like it. So I actually started like in last Q4. I actually added like a question to my I have like a lot of these like trying to improve my own way of doing stuff, and I started adding a question to people I like talk to, and I was like, why wouldn't most people want to do this? And I think what I found was like, I talked to an entrepreneur that I really like, and I really like the idea. And they said something which is so profoundly smart. They were like, yeah, the reason people wouldn't do this or wouldn't invest in this, I would say are these three main reasons. And when they said that, I was like, that's amazing, because like it shows such a great clarity of thought, not only about the idea, but actually what's perceived really bad about the idea. And I really, really like that, because I felt like for me, like it helped me a lot to realize what I like about it. Because I realized like I don't actually fear those things. But when they said that, I realized that's true. Of course, people fear this, which means that this can have a quote unquote venture opportunity.
Wow, that's such a fascinating way to think about it. So it's basically kind of like almost like a tripartite structure that you look at. You know, the longevity of the business model. Will it last until 2050? Does it make business sense? Is it unit economics profitable? And then also, is it differentiated or wildly different? So you know that it's not going to be able to be replicated. So yeah, I really like that sort of framework that you use. And I'm curious, how did you apply it? If you take examples of from your fund one or fund two, and we know some of the companies really well now. We've seen them, you know, grow very rapidly. And congratulations on, you know, how quickly the success has been reached already. I mean, success is obviously, you know,
Yeah, exactly. It's a monopoly money game.
relative.
Yes.
Yeah. But if there are a couple of portfolio companies that you'd like to sort of profile or spotlight, how did you sort of work with them to get where they are today, after you've chosen them from this sort of game of
Yeah.
roulette, as it were?
The strange processes.
What's sort of some of the ways that you think that your fund has sort of added value to help them get to where they are today?
I think there are a couple of things I think that I think that the core of what we do is I think that, and the reason I'm like hesitating this, I think it's so glib and it's so frustrating. And I think that we're trying to operate as founders as much as we can, and not quote unquote as investors. And what I mean by that is that, like in the best of cases, we talk to the entrepreneur a lot, and they're like, we become their first port of call, whatever happens. So like 3 days ago, one of our startups had like a weird thing that happened to them. They were just like, what is this? Like, is this even legal what they're doing here? And they just WhatsApp me right away. And we're like, this just happened like 6 minutes ago. I don't know if this is a hoax, fraud. I don't know. Like, I have no idea what this is. And like, we had a 15-minute conversation, like came up with a couple of questions to move on. We talked later that evening, we talked morning after. Yesterday evening, I think we kind of figured it out and settled it. And I think it's done. And it is a nasty thing that happened to them. And I think that we kind of now figured out how to mitigate it. I find the human brain, like, I think that we're just a prediction machine. We're just trying to predict what's happening in the next nanosecond constantly. And I think the way we do that, of course, is like, using the sensory apparatus, and we're just like course correcting and everything. But I think that we're underestimating the power of narratives. Because I think a narrative for a person is that it's the filter you look at everything through. It is like you get that signal in and it just passes through like, okay, I am this person, I'm this old, I have kids, whatever. Like, what are my expectations? What are my expectations from myself? And that just filters everything through. Like, and then it like that then gives the machine not the real answer if the dog is running towards you, but it gives you the prediction if the dog is running towards you. And then like a nanosecond later, you will get more data, but it's always going to be filtered through this narrative. So if you're a person that is afraid of dogs, you will find that dogs are chasing you a lot more than they are. And if it's dark, you're going to find a lot more dogs chasing you than they are, because like just like low amount of data, and you will like your high prediction errors. So sometimes I just find that like sometimes when talking to founders, like we can just figure out what the narrative is. And I think that a lot of times it's harder to get a narrative out than get a new one in. So a lot of times, like when people start a company, they're like, I'm afraid about failing. And we just have to tell them that like you're failed now. Like you have nothing. You have no revenues. You have no customers. The people who are working for you are crazy to work with you. Like, it can't get worse. Like, sorry.
So that's
So
definitely very reassuring, very
it's only
comforting.
upwards from here. So like, if you
Yeah.
end up running out of money, you haven't failed. You just like you just kept the flat line, right? And then it's something like, it's a harsh story, but sometimes people go like, you're right. We should just try stuff. Yes, we
Mm,
should just try stuff, right? And then
yeah.
again, the prediction machine of different universes is like, should you hire 20 people? Then you might end up in this universe. But if you hire 2, this is like, so we just try to do that. And I think for different companies, different stages, different problems, I think one of the things I am so happy for is that I still get WhatsApp by entrepreneurs that I angel invested in 20 years ago. Like last year, I helped three of the founders I angel invested in their M&A process of selling their companies. And the first one who texted me in Q1, and they said, oh, we're doing this, like we got this offer maybe, like in deep conversations, I really want to talk to you. And I texted them back saying, don't you have, and I mentioned they have like 3 fairly famous funds, like one big Nordic fund that is very, very solid, and then 2 funds that are like internationally solid funds. And I text them back and said like, but you have these 3, what's the board saying? What are they saying? And they just said, I don't want to talk to them, I want to talk to you. And I was like, no, shit, they're like, no, I don't know anything. And then they said, yeah, I've talked to one of them. I do not want to talk to them. I have figured out that they don't know this. They have never sold companies. And the thing, I ran M&A like for 2.5 years for BlackBerry. Like I've bought million companies. And because I've angel invested in 100 and then invested in 20 funds and then Pale.Dot, like I've done a lot of like on the sell side as well. So I was like, okay, I'll take you through the sell side process of like selling a company. And we end up like the company got acquired. I think 2.5 months later, the founder was super happy, the acquirer was super happy, everything was great, the investors were happy. But it's one of those things where I was both appalled, but also really, really happy that the founder had that relationship to kind of ping me and feel like, I need help. I haven't talked to you for like 4 years. I've raised a ton of money. I need you now. And I was so happy that the person felt that they had the trust in our relationship to say, I know it's Saturday, but like, can I have an hour of you now? And I think I was really happy about it. If I look at like my gratitude journaling for that period, my gratitude was like, damn, that this person like did this. So like, I think that's like, I don't know, it comes with a package. Like we're entrepreneurs trying to build companies. That's I think the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a sense, it's very similar to a venture builder model because you're actually helping them, in a sense, build. I mean, I know you classify it as a fund, but you're getting your hands dirty. You're sort of, working from the ground up and helping and working very closely with them to ideate and be that sounding board for these entrepreneurs, which as entrepreneurs, especially in an emerging sector like climate, can feel like a fairly lonely experience. So you're there, to support them, which is great.
I think that the tricky thing there is like I always tell people like view me as your like absent-minded intern, because I think that the difference here is like if you're a venture builder, you usually have like amazing developers, amazing designers, amazing marketeers on staff. So like if you come in and say like, please build this for me, please help me with this, like we are the person that you ping and say, can you help me with this? And then we're like, yeah. And then we do it for 6 minutes and then something else happens. And they're like, are you still there? And we're like, shit, I forgot them. Okay, sorry. Yes, I'll pick it up again. So I think that what I find is so funny is like, I always tell people like, again, like I'm your absent-minded intern. So like you have to run me. Like if you want something, ping me, ping me, ping me, ping me, and I'll do it for you. But if you don't ping me, well, we don't. And I think that's 10x for most board members, like and shareholders. Like if you don't tell your investors, I want an intro to, here's a list of customers I want to intro to, here's their LinkedIn profile, do you know any of them? Mark, I see you're connected to the person here. Alice, I see you're connected to the person here, can you please intro? And then like 2 days later you come back, thanks Mark for the great intro. Then like everyone else wakes up, shit, Mark did an intro, I haven't done anything, right? You just manage these people to kind of do sales for you. And like you write like the top list of the week. Yeah, Alyssa did like, 12 intros now. She's amazing. Everyone else like, oh, I look really bad. Like shit, we have to do intros. I think these are the tricks you have to do. And I think if you sit back and think these people are like your shareholders that are sitting there reading your quarter reports, you're wrong. These are just normal people that put their pants on one leg at a time, and they want you to succeed as well. So I think that's one of the things that we try to get all of our entrepreneurs to realize, that like nobody knows the truth. And like you're the person that's spending most of your time on this. You're probably the smartest person in the room on it. The thing that we can do is that we can be the sparring partner, or just a sounding board where you're just like, I'm too much into my own thing. Can you just like help me like unpick what's happening here? And I think that we have huge respect actually for, I think it's amazing now to see the last 2 or 3 years where actually venture builders in climate have really started, that go in with like crazy cool science teams, like dev teams, like everything, that actually like, we're going to build this like green methane product for you, and like recruiting amazing founders. I think that's a super cool model. I think one of the headaches with that model is that it's sometimes not compatible with venture, because the venture builder has to take such a large shareholding. So like it might be an issue, but I think for the planet, I think it's net positive.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. So as we're coming up to sort of the end of our conversation, I just wanted to sort of talk about, more geographical kind of question here, where your fund currently is domiciled in Europe, and most of your investments are between Europe and North America. And curious to understand, I mean, as you think about cross-border pollination opportunities with countries like India, emerging markets, and other parts of the world in the global south, do you see there being kind of, sort of in areas within these economies that excite you, particularly on the climate tech space? And how do you think about your sort of global strategy moving forward?
So the reason that we do Europe and US is just because it's easy. And I think that we have done one investment, for example, in Kenya, which happened to be legally domiciled in Delaware, but like they're all operating in Kenya. I think the headache of doing investments outside your geo in many different shapes or forms is, first of all, I think it's, to be just very, very honest, it's just time zones. So there's just like, I think that I even find it with our like West Coast US investments, it's 9 time zones away. Like I used to have customers in my previous startup when I built it, I used to have customers in Korea and San Francisco at the same time, which means that you can never sleep because somebody's mad at you. So I think that it's just like very unhealthy. Like you just have to select time zones that you can work with. Secondly, I think that you actually have a very big problem with just tax. That like we might not have a problem with it, but our investors might say, where are you investing? And we're saying in these countries. And like even within like Europe, US, we have so much paperwork to kind of fill out that okay, this is this kind of company in this kind of geography, but then another country would actually market slightly differently. So no, it's not like real estate. I know your country thinks it's real estate. It isn't. So I think that just becomes another big thing. Thirdly, I think, which is I think one of the baffling things I find, is that it's very, very hard to understand for me, like what works in a certain geo. And I think that one of the most crazy things for me ever is like when we meet a startup that does something which is like complete default in the Nordics, or like in Sweden, to be more exact, where we are, and they're pitching it as like this is rocketry. And like we met this kind of like composting company in San Francisco, for example. We met like a heat pump company, like in Spain. And what other like absurdities have we met? Like waste sorting. Like these companies, when like they tell us what they do, and we're like, but this is like everybody does this, right? And they're like, no, 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 this is completely new. And we're like, I have done this for 40 years, I think. And it's just like every single household has it in Sweden. But then you realize, oh, this is brand new. This is crazy new. And I think that, the funny thing about Sweden, which is really sad, is that Sweden have like some behaviors that are like really, really on the front. But the thing, if you look at them capitalizing these behaviors and turning them into businesses, they're shit. So like, it's really sad to see how many times we look at an idea and we end up investing in something that exists in Sweden as default. But we know that this German company or this American company or this British company or Spanish company or whatever, they're going to make a huge business out of it, because Sweden is just sitting there being like, waste sorting, what is that? And we're like, it's a huge business, right? So I think it's really sad. So like, for us, looking at other countries, I think that if we do it, we probably have to get local partners to kind of tell us that this is amazing. Like, I think that when we invested in Amini in Kenya, like they're gathering the African data for like the whole continent, like for so many different areas, like satellite data and everything. And like the core pitch essentially is, the thing that you think is available everywhere is not available here. So like, it's so hard when you realize what it must be. You must be able to just like go to like a page and, you know, literally download like a CSV file. And it's like, no, not for Kenya. But you're like, but then it's coming in 2 years, because it's like, you know, it must be like $1 trillion business. It is $1 trillion business. Yeah, but then they're going to do it. And it's so hard for us to then be like, nobody will do it but these people. Because like, it's almost strange that it is strange that it exists, right? So that's one of the problems I find, even when we're working with like, I don't know, like Germany, which is, you know, an hour drive from here, where we're just like, what the heck, is this not existing in Germany? And like, why do you put, you know, chocolate in yogurt? Yeah, okay, it's a southern German thing, I guess. So like,
Yeah,
it's really wild.
interesting. No, that's great. And then I think, just to finally, close off our discussion, I want to just quickly talk about the conference that you hold every year,
Yeah.
the annual conference, the Drop, which is one of the most anticipated events in climate globally. So it would be great to understand, how you came up with the idea, what you sort of achieve every year. I know you have these ripples that smaller discussions that you host in a thematic way during the conference. But what's sort of been the reason why you hold this conference? How do you sort of bring all these different folks together?
Yeah, the whole idea is like, how do you open people's eyes and get more collaboration within ClimateX? So we want to bring a lot of people that essentially, and it's a bit of a weird take this, because we want to bring people who actually allocate capital. So like, we want to bring like big endowments, institutions, venture funds, angel investors, whatever. We want to bring them together, and then we want to have a lot of essentially non-entrepreneurs on stage, like activists and like researchers, to like talk really wildly about topics, because we find that like, if you have sharks and you put blood in the water, the sharks are just going to focus on the blood, and they're just going to try to find the prey. So if you go to an event and there's like a speed dating event with startups and everything, the VCs are just going to be like, I have to meet the startups, I have to take notes. But if you try to like remove them and just say, it's kind of like a girls' night or a boys' night, like, it's just like, calm down, just be yourself. You don't have to like brag and look good or anything. You just talk to each other. And then what we've done over the years is we've tested a bit of like how much percentage of founders. And I think what we're trying to do now, 2024, is the plan is to do the 17th, like with the main day, to do majority investors, like maybe 70% investors, maybe, and then having like 20% that are like later stage founders, because the later stage founders are not that keen on fundraising right now. They're usually like, ooh, like, now we're building a business, like, I have runway, I don't want to talk to a lot of investors. To be able to have these conversations. And then the 18th, we're planning to have like the massive frenzy day of like startups, and actually maybe like we have somebody who wants to start like an LPGP thing of like getting investors to come in. And I think it's like, I think what we're trying to like build here is more of a collaboration festival, where you come in and we've created a space, which is a very strange space, old train yard, and we create an atmosphere which is very welcome. And then you leave and you have like 400 unread WhatsApp messages from like new friends that you're like, oh my God, like, who are these people I've just chatted to all day? And you have so many of these new ideas where like, I went to like this dinner and they talked about this, and like, maybe we can reprogram genes, and maybe we can do this, and you just come back with ideas and thoughts. And I think that's really what I think we need as well as an ecosystem. Like, because I think the headache is that if you look at the trillions needed to kind of, change climate change, and you look at the global economy being multi-trillion, like, if you look at like, if the global economy, the machine of the global economy said, oh no, we have an infection, it's called climate change, we need to get rid of it, just boost the immune system, let's figure it out. That would be a lot of work, but it wouldn't require all of the power of the whole human, of like the organism to do it. It would be like substantial. We would be sick for a while to like get this thing out of the system. the thing now is that now we're allocating like, tiny amounts. We're just like, yeah, like maybe like wave your arm a bit because then maybe this flu disappears. And I think that if we treated climate change as we treated like like COVID, for example, but so many other like things that we should treat way, way higher, like we didn't treat COVID enough even. If we kind of ramped up and thought we really need to do this, then we would have probably like be able to solve it. And the same thing I think with like biodiversity, which is the next wave, which is now bundled into climate change as a problem, right? And then I think that if we wanted, we maybe be able to tackle it inequality, and if when we're at it, let's figure out trust. We trust each other. So I think that the way I see the world is that we're just this big machine, and we have these three problems that are like tackling like big problems for us. So if you build this machine, you want efficiency. You want the input and the output to be good, just like any machine. The headache is that we have inequality, which means that essentially you're not allowed to use all parts. Like you're building this machine, this like if you think about like a Lego box, you're building the Lego box, but then you realize there's Lego Technic. Whoa, can I use all these things? And they're like, no, we can't use those. Why not? They're the wrong color, or they're the wrong gender, or like we don't really like them. And it just feels like, so I'm gonna build this thing, but without those. That just is like super hard. And like we built that machine for like 1,000 of years, but we're not allowed to use those cogs, which is just, and they have been used in other countries. I mean, like I think that you see so many countries like, that's an amazing country, that was an amazing culture, but why don't we trust the people from that country now? Like that's just stupid. And then and then that you have trust, and trust is just like, so like that's one area is like we can't use all the parts, and maybe we can use all the parts but not together in a good way. And then another thing, you have trust, and trust is just like lack of lubrication. It's just friction in the system. So like you put these things together, and like then just like there's just distrust, like distrust between people, distrust between institutions, distrust by so many things. We're just sitting there and like, why is this machine not running? And it's like, oh, because you don't trust your government, you don't, like that's wrong. And then I think the third thing, you have climate change. And climate change is just like this big stress on the whole system. This like, it's like the human body is like slightly sick. It just feels like, get well. And the problem is like, if we just treat that symptom, like the machine can operate better. And I think for me, I think one of the reasons we want to do the drop is like we want to gather people, have these topics so we talk about them, and then suddenly people might be like, hey, we should probably ramp up immune system. Like we have more here. Like we can do more. And for me, it's not really about like pale blue dot or anything. It's really about like the body's sick. Like you just like talk about it and let's treat the body. And the crazy thing, we're all immune system. Some of people here are macrophages. Some of them are like we're different bodies. Some of them is prestige. Some are like first of a kind financing. Some of them are like crazy big institutions that only do like $1 billion checks. Whatever. We can all work together to get this thing out of our body.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think that's a great way for us to kind of wrap up the conversation, this collaborative effort that we all need to put in as different stakeholders. And I love your analogy of the world as a machine. I think it's really, really useful. I'm going to start using it as well. Really, really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much, Hampus, and such an inspiration to all of us building climate funds in different parts of the world. So I really hope we can do more together
Yes.
as two funds aiming for the same goal. But for now, thank you for coming and speaking with us today, and looking forward to our next conversation.